Welcome everybody, and today's video is going to be all about what do you do if your cam belt or cam chain is suspected of breaking. Those that follow my channel will know that this is the situation I find myself in at present with my BMW. Well, there's no getting away from it, it's not a good situation. But the first thing I would say is don't panic. Seriously, don't panic. In fact, never panic. Panic is something that's never productive. Doesn't matter what's happened, there will be a way out of it, okay? So with cam belts and cam chains, timing belts, timing chains, you can either have an interference engine or a non-interference engine. Most of the cars out there are going to have interference engines, and interference basically means if the belt were to fail and the timing all goes out of whack, then you're going to get damage. And that's what we're talking about today. What do we do? What do we tear our hair out and run around screaming in desperation? No, we don't. So let's just cover very quickly what actually happens inside the engine when your cam belt fails. So this animation is showing us the pistons firing, this valve sequencing between the valves, the inlet valves and the exhaust valves opening, and then what happens when the belt snaps. What happens? Well, it loses that synchronization, and the likelihood is that the piston from one or two of the cylinders is gonna rise and smash into one of those valves because it hasn't closed at the right time. Then the resulting damage is what we're worried about. So this is where we find ourselves. So at this point now, you really need to do a little bit of investigation. And that's what I've been trying to do with my car, just to determine if the cam chain had actually snapped. Evidence points to the fact that it has. I haven't stripped the whole top of the engine off to do it because I just haven't had time. So I've had to devise cunning ways of doing it with a little borescope camera. Okay, at this point, let me just quickly explain how I determined that my timing chain had broken without taking the rocker cover off. So, as ever, I'm always looking for a quick way of doing things. So, have a look at this diagram now. This shows you the arrangement of the timing chains in the back of the N57 engine. So, what I figured was, if we are looking from the other side, where you see the eye at the top, looking at the back of that top sprocket, that behind there is a gear, and that's what we were looking at, that where the teeth are with no chain on, because it's geared to the other camshaft next to it, and then that sprocket that you can see there at the very top of the picture is connected to that same shaft. Now that has a chain on it, and that should look like that, so that's an error from my last video. But what we need to know is it all connected by a chain, or is the timing out? Now, what I went and did was I went and cranked the engine one more time. I figure all the damage is already done, so we can't do any more damage. And since if I crank it, the crank is turning some amount, that means if all the chains were intact, in my mind, that the top camshaft that we already have an image of should have turned. So I took the original image from where the camshaft sensor hole is, and then I cranked it, and then I took another image in the same hole to see whether that sprocket had turned, and we can see here it had not moved, not budged an inch. So to my logic there, the lower chain that runs around the crankshaft must have failed in order for the top camshaft to not turn at all once I crank the car. So once you've determined that the inevitable has happened, and you just got to resign yourself to the fact that there will be some valve damage. Now, at this point, you can either go off down the route of replacing the engine completely. That's quite an extreme way to have to go, and you don't have to, it doesn't have to be that way. I don't know which way I'm going to have to go with my engine just yet, but it's going to be an engine out job on this particular vehicle, because the cam chain, the timing chain, is right at the back of the vehicle, right where it mates up to the gearbox. Because it's a rear wheel drive car, it's a longitudinal engine, which means transmission's right at the back. And in BMW's infinite wisdom, they put the timing chain right at the back as well, which means separation of gearbox and engine, and then engine out to have a look at it to determine what the damage is. Let's just have a little look at the kind of damage that you will see if your piston has smashed into one of your valve stems. Let's have a look at this. So this image is showing us what could happen. You could have dramatically bent, cracked, ever so slightly bent valve stems, and if you're really unlucky, the piston's going to be damaged as well. Now, I'm hoping for no piston damage in my vehicle, as we all would be, wouldn't we, in this situation? My personal feeling is that if the evidence presents cylinder or piston damage, I think it's probably more economical to source a reconditioned or a used engine and reinstall that into the car. If there isn't that level of damage, it's not actually that much work, because it's all in the top. So if your head gasket sits here, you've got the engine block, head gasket, and then the cylinder head. All of the work is in the head. So I'm not saying it's easy, I'm just saying there's lots of little components which aren't too expensive. All the valves that we saw opening and closing, they're not too expensive to source. All the little rockers that sit being pushed open and closed by the camshafts, they're all small components, so they can be sourced not too expensively. And since the engine's in pieces anyway, it can be reassembled. So that, you know, that can be one way to go. And of course, obviously a new timing chain kit or timing belt, whatever you've got, as part of that as well. So, you know, it's going to be reasonably expensive to get done, but that's the way I'm hoping to go with mine. So remember, first thing, if you think your timing chain is broken, don't panic. Seriously, don't panic. Take it easy, don't jump to conclusions, and work it out. Don't jump to the point of thinking it's broken without evidence. Get in there. Has it broken? If it has broken, still don't panic. How much damage has it done? That is the key question. Once you confirm how much damage is done, that's when the choices begin.